Okay, good morning. We're going to start with Tanya, and let's get to it. Really interesting stuff. Um, so yesterday we finished the discussion about how intrinsically connected the soul is to Hashem. There's a lot to talk about, but the idea is the soul is the inner breath of Hashem blown into the person. It's such a constant inner flow from God to the person to animate the soul. The imagery the Torah gives, your soul's tied to God with a rope. And therefore, when a person sins down here, they're affecting a degradation. They're tugging the rope of the source, the inner breath of Hashem, the source of the soul comes from, down as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about in chapter 7 and on about how to do teshuvah. Now, just to be fair, we talked about teshuvah already. We said in the first chapter, teshuvah is really simple. Teshuvah is just regret what you did, resolve not to do it again, and that's the basis of teshuvah. There's some details how to make a full atonement, but really it's a very simple inner realization and resolve. But today he says the ulam derech emes vayosher, the true and straightforward way. In other words, what's the sustainable way of tshuva? Like, what's a tshuva that's self-motivated? In the Steinsaltz Tanya, he notes that emes, truth in Chassidus, is always about endurance. Emes is sustainable; it's forever. Can't have tshuva can't have emes for 10 years, then it's like, oh no, it's not true anymore. So emes is kind of interchangeable with enduring. So what's an enduring type of tshuva? To hey tata niskaris little hey's based dvaram klau, to bring the lower hey back to the name of God, meaning, in other words, to reconnect our souls fully to God, the source. There's two ways. There's two general elements. So I'm going to paraphrase because I was told that it's easier to just kind of paraphrase rather than read the Hebrew inside. The first element of enduring teshuvah is about awakening compassion. That you think about what's going on, that your soul, an inner breath of God embodied in this world, and it's literally the greatest manifestation of God is the human soul, as far as the greatest reflection of Hashem.
Your consciousness,
yeah, all those parts. This is the greatest manifestation of God in the world, is a human soul, with consciousness and free choice and all the good stuff. And you're taking literally the crown prince, your soul. The person is, and through sin, it's falling into a deep pit. What's the deep pit? It's an underground dungeon. What's underground dungeon? It's really bringing the soul into a very, very captive state in the klipos, in the forces of impurity. So first of all, you have to arouse compassion on your pitiful state of being, that your soul, the greatest child of God in the universe, through one's actions, purposefully or not, is entrapping it into, captivity. It's saying that now we, unfortunately, this used to be like an olden day imagery of the duke who takes the Jew and puts him into a dungeon in the ground, a pit in the ground. Unfortunately, today, what's going on with the hostages, it's like it's a constant on our minds, and literally the soul, in a sense, is being done the same thing to it. And on top of that, this is another point, just to expand, because we're trying to give real meditation to arouse compassion. Because this is step one of creating an enduring return. also think about that what your soul represents. Your soul is the crown prince. And the crown prince is degraded. It's not just the prince, it's also the name of the parent, the king, right? Is being degraded more than a commoner. And this is so we're both trying to. So step one is again about arousing compassion for our soul, feeling bad for our soul, about how it's captive in all parts of our, negative habits and behavior. It says in the verse, the king is bound with gutters, which in the Zohar, Tikkun Zohar, translates it as the gutters, also mean the gutters of the mind, meaning the king, meaning your soul, and being the crown prince representing the king, you're degrading the soul and the source of the soul and binding it up in what? Through the stream of negative thoughts or ungodly thoughts. And this again is the most famous concept we talk about, the exile of the Shekhinah. What's the exile of the Shekhinah? That one's soul is the exile of the Shekhinah. The fact that God is not,
but the Shekhinah is something I thought was the visible presence of Hashem.
And we're saying the visible presence of Hashem is the source of one's soul. And it's like a rope. So if you degrade the lower part, the bottom of the rope, you put it into mud, let's say, right? Or you lower it from, you're lowering the whole chain of the rope, and you're lowering the whole thing. So you're, in a sense, it's very obvious that when the let's say, I don't know, I'm just thinking this up, $1,000 silk rope, it's in a museum, it's famous, heirloom, and someone goes and takes the bottom of the rope and sticks it into dung. Even though the higher parts of the silk rope, let's say, aren't in the dung, the whole thing is degraded, right? So it's saying that there's a automatic effect by our soul being captive through the unholy forces that affects God being to some degree lowered and captive in the unholy forces in the term of exile. Oh. And he points out, just to go on, is that there was a common practice, not so common today, but there's definitely a part of halacha. There's another prayer. You thought there's only 3 prayers? Surprise! There's like 4 and 5 every day. The fourth one would be Kriya Shema Shalmita, right? You say Shema before bed. It's a custom. It's not considered it's a customary enshrined as law, but it's whatchamacallit. It takes a couple of minutes to do proper Kriya Shema. Then there's a 5th one people do at midnight called Tikkun Chatzos, either by midnight or sometimes a little before midnight. It's considered a time when the divine judgment is tempered by the divine compassion. So it's an opportune time to pray, to lament the destruction of the temple. And this is a real practice. There's actually, like, in certain Siddurim, they have it. It's not so common because of our weekend, sleeping needs, And that's a very ideal time. He's saying, so the best time is to bring compassion, is to be up at midnight and lament the temple and lament the exile and lament your soul's pitiful state, and that contributes to that. He adds another point to make this meditation effective, because the goal is to get out of your complacency and habits. Step 1 is a meditation of compassion of your soul. And to add to that meditation, they'll give it detail, make it real. You have to also preface it about thinking about the greatness of God, because you only really, feel bad for somebody depending on how you appreciate them, right? If you don't, does it hurt you that someone in some faraway country is suffering, or is, if you don't, we don't know, you don't really care about. So too with God. God is this very, our appreciation is always dependent of God, is about meditating, contemplating about God's infinite awesomeness. And when you do that, then it really hits home how one, through their actions, has literally, took the king and embarrassed the king and put the king in a dung heap, so to speak. So it just adds to the, it sounds a little bit like guilt, but I think it's supposed to be more, appreciate the reality of what exile is really a captivity of the Shekhinah and of the soul. You have to appreciate your soul, what that is. You have to appreciate what the Shekhinah and God is. And then you can appreciate that the exile that they're being put in captive, how unacceptable that is. Okay, and that arouses compassion, step one. Step two, he says, the second element needed to have enduring teshuvah is to subdue the forces of klipa, of evil. What is the force of evil? As we said earlier, and we can't get too much into this, is that the whole concept of evil in Judaism, as elucidated in Kabbalah and Hasidus, is evil has no inherent value. It is only created by God to be a contradistinction to goodness, or a means to overcome the darkness, to get to the light. Meaning, it's a means to an end. And the more a person stumbles in sin, they give more, they puff up the this bubble of evil and klipa. As the verse says, if you exalt yourself like an eagle, it's like klipa, unholiness, is its number one character trait on its on its shidduch resume. When it has when it puts the when klipa is looking for a match, it says, what's its number one character trait? Arrogance, puffed up self-aggrandizement. You know what I'm saying? That's the number one character trait of klipa, arrogance, because the whole thing is a bubble. It's only a puffed up bubble that has no substance. And therefore, a person's, let's say, wants to teshuvah, they have to attack the negativity in them, the klipa in them, and the best attack would be into one's egotism. When you subjugate one's egotism, that is one of that puts a crack in the shell of the unholiness that is captive, that is kind of blocking your soul from connecting to Hashem in a real way. As it says, it says in the Zohar, on the verse in Psalms, Zivche Elikim Ruach Nishbara, the offerings to Elokim, sacrifice to God, what is it? What are they really? They should be a broken spirit, or a leiv nishbar v'nitzke, a heart broken and contrite, a contrite heart.
Where are you reading?
I'm reading in 87. So it's interesting. He analyzes this to bolster our point that you have to break the egotism as a step two to really make an enduring teshuvah and become a real. Because a person who's really connected to God would be the opposite of a person who is detached, who is, detached from God. What is the person what's the number one sign of someone who is ignoring and making a wall of separation between themselves and God? It would be arrogance, because that's the hallmark sign of unholiness. So when you want to get closer to God, you do the opposite. You have to be humble to God. Humility is the number one trait of Moses. Why? It's not a mistake, because that's that's the hallmark sign of a closeness and attachment to God, is humility. I'm the small speck, part of this great, awesome God. So those are the two steps, and that ends today's Tanya. Tomorrow we'll talk about how is it broken? How do you break it? So we gave a general idea of popping your bubble egotism. How? He'll give some more pointed steps tomorrow. But basically, We're trying to give ourselves an idea how to become better people. Better people means doing constant teshuvah, not browbeating ourselves, but constant return to Hashem and to reverse the concealment that our soul and God is going through our, our waywardness or our lapse of consciousness. And the way we do that is two elements. Element one is about invoking compassion. Compassion is a very powerful midah, character trait, and it's because it's rooted in one of the greatest supernal elements of God, compassion. And we explained how to do that a little bit. And then we said the second step is to pop the egotism, break the arrogance. How? That's for tomorrow. Okay, I'm just going to end this recording.